Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Today we're going to talk about why does my chainsaw leak so much oil? I'm sure everyone would be asking that question at one time or another, and I guess if you're an old hand at chainsaws you'll know most of the answers, but there are a few reasons. First of all, we'll talk about the O-ring that's in the cap there. So on the cap, if you take the cap out, you'll find out, if you flip the cap out, there's a little O-ring that's here. And look, that O-ring will not cause any trouble. A lot of people say, oh, the O-ring's worn. O-ring is never going to wear when it's sitting in oil. That's never going to happen. The only thing that can happen to the O-ring is that if it's mistreated, you might find out that you might be a bit rough with it, or it may get some bits of sawdust or something like that. It may damage the O-ring. So that is one reason if the O-ring does get damaged. The only other thing that can happen, and I have seen it happen, and it happens with polymers, is what we call reversion. That when something is made, especially plastic pipe, PVC, when it comes out an extruder, it's made under pressure. And over a period of a couple of years, it can go back into a relaxed state. When it goes back into a relaxed state, all the forces and pressures relax and the polymer actually can shrink a little bit. If that happens, then if the O-ring slightly shrinks a little bit, then you can find out that it may not make a good seal and it will be leaking from the cap. So that's pretty easy to find out, because all you've got to do is lay your saw over like that and put a rag underneath it, and you'll see that it'll be all wet, and you put your finger there. So you'll find oil if it's leaking. So it's pretty easy to find that out. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, in the oil tank, there's a rubber tube. And that rubber tube will connect to the oil pump. Now, there's all different types of oil pumps. This is an MS380. So the oil pump on here is right down the bottom, and it's got an adjuster. It is a separate oil pump that's driven by gears. They made them different 20 years ago. So it has a rubber tube from the tank, from the oil tank that goes to there. A lot of the chainsaws are like that. There's a rubber tube from the tank. And sometimes what can happen there is that the rubber tube can perish, or it can lose its elasticity, and it's not sitting as tight in the tank or attached to the oil pump, and you could have a slight seepage over time there. As well as the actual oil pump itself, it leaks oil, and oil will come out in this part around here. So that's another way that if your saw is sitting like this and you come back a week later and you lift it up and there's a pool of oil there. So that's another reason there. The other thing that can happen is that the oil is filled right up to this point here. If we look at the oil tank, and the pump is much lower. So through gravity, that is another reason it can leak. If it's just sitting on there and by gravity, and it just slowly can leak out, whether it's sitting on the shelf or it's sitting in the case. You've also got capillary action. That's probably not so much going to happen, but could happen. The other thing that can happen is the siphoning effect. So if you've got a full tank of oil, and just say there's a little bit of pressure in the tank and it starts to slowly drip out, the siphoning effect, once it starts, it just doesn't stop until the tank's empty. So that's another thing that can happen. And also, when we talk about atmospheric pressure, you might find out that the pressure between the outside and the inside of the tank is different, and a bit of pressure can build up inside the tank. So that's going to also make it happen. Okay, So there's some of the reasons as to why your chainsaw can leak a lot of oil, and in some cases I've got some saws that just leak more than others. So how do you stop it? Well, quite simply, when you finish with your chainsaw, you're better off emptying your oil tank. Now, if I leave it in storage with full of oil and full of petrol, or half full, because just say it's firewood cutting season and I'm using my saw every couple of days, I'm not going to drain the oil and fuel out of it. So the best way I sit the saw is not like this. The best way to sit the saw in that situation is simply turn it up on its side with the bar facing upwards like that. I will guarantee you don't leak oil, because the oil hole now from the where it oils the bar is facing up the top, and the oil pump on this is also facing up the top. And if you've got the oil slinger, that's another place where it can leak oil. On the newer pumps they have, when you take off the clutch, there's an oil slinger that's around there, and that can leak in that spot. But if everything's facing upwards, then it can't leak. So therefore, if I transport it in the car or the ute, it sits like that. But if it's transported, once I get home, after it's being transported, I'll leave it like that in the garage until I need to use it next time. So that's the way that I store my saws when they've got oil and fuel in them, tipped up on their side. And I have never had one leak oil when it's tipped up like that. So 9 times out of 10, it is, as I said, it's through capillary action or a change in pressure or gravity. It's usually one of those. So next time you've got trouble with your chainsaw leaking, tip it up on the side like this, and I'll guarantee you that will solve most of your problems, because every single chainsaw will leak some amount of oil over a period of time. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.